welcome everybody this evening. We have another guest speaker to present her story, and I found it fascinating in my earlier conversation with Stacy Natzel. We met at an IANS conference, and I found her story somewhat compelling. The more stories we can share with one another about the breadth of who we are, I think the better off society is. So Stacy's had some experiences that I think, Stacy, you'd say you don't categorize them as pure near-death experiences, but they were very similar. And what arose from that is kind of fascinating. Um, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about your experience. I'd like to turn it over to you. After you've done with your presentation, we'll give people a chance to ask questions. Thank you for being here this evening.
Of course. Yeah. Um, I actually, I don't have anything prepared. When I did the IANS conference, I had a full speech that I had to memorize, mostly because when I do have my experience laid out on paper, I articulate it best on writing. So I'm good with prompting questions. You're welcome to ask me open-ended questions, and I'll do the best I can to answer.
So let's start maybe with your early experiences. What was it that happened to you that kind of opened your mind up to there's something more to this reality than most people realize?
When we spoke last time, it was similar to what you were saying about asking questions. And before I had this crazy experience where I felt like I was out of body, I I I brought my daughter into the world, my second child, and I just questioned just why evil existed, why there was so much suffering. And when you bring a child into a world that you're so full of what we're going through right now, seeing all the shadows rise in the world and all the horrors of child trafficking, that's what really got me. And this was in 2017, before it actually got brought to light. So nobody was really talking about it. But I had read a couple testimonies of women who had been in the industry and they had healed from it, and had been in centers where they were working with people on healing. And so it wasn't out in the open yet. And I remember reading those stories and hearing their interviews, and I just broke down. And the same thing happened when I met people who were involved with the foster system and how the kids were being abused in that system. So I was just very vulnerable, I think. And then I questioned why evil existed. And I fasted. I started to fast. And then I started to read the Bible because I just was looking for answers. And I did hit a wall at some point when reading the Bible. And I just became very fearful. Like, I didn't want to mess up. I didn't want, it almost made me feel like I had to live up to this certain standard. I was probably reading Revelations or something when I was feeling like, this fear of being left behind if there was some type of rapture. And what would I do if I didn't live by moral standards? And then the next day, and I think I'd been fasting for about a week and a half or so. And the next day I woke up with God's voice in my mind. And not just the voice, but just this love that I'd never known. And it filled me up. And I didn't know what to do. My husband was laying next to me sleeping, and tears were just coming down my face because I just couldn't believe I was loved that much. And he spoke to me as a father. I think that's just what I needed at the time. And I responded well to that. And I asked questions. And every time I asked questions, I was given visions. And I kind of lost track of time at that point. I think my husband just thought I was going through postpartum depression. And so he took care of our daughter. I wasn't able to breastfeed. So he had to get her on formula. But it was just, the time just kind of went by, and I think it was a matter of a week with these intense visions, and the veil got very thin. So then I was starting to see that I was in this world, but also seeing all of the stuff, the spiritual veil, the stuff going on. it seemed kind of like spiritual warfare. I know people have said that it's not the case. We're here to learn and grow, but I did see some type of warfare going on between light and dark. And I couldn't explain it all. The only thing I could see was that there was the shadows themselves. This dark energy was sticking to people. And I thought they were demons. Because coming from a Christian background, that's all I could see was that it was dark and it was stuck on people, and it started to smell like different things like sulfur or rotting garbage. And then just things that were being revealed to me, like a dish soap with preservatives in it. The medical industry, I saw all the poisons in the prescriptions people take. And at that time, my husband was using an inhaler, and I could smell the poison in it. And it was almost like every single dark shadow that I saw was part of this energy that we had created out of greed, that wasn't from love. It was stuff that we had created on the planet. And when I started to fear it, it started to shapeshift into faces at night and scare me. And then I think I just surrendered to that fear. I got so scared, I let it consume me. And it fed off of that fear. So the more I was afraid, the more it just stuck to me. And that's when I went to this dark place. And it seemed like I'd been there a while. Like I couldn't get out until I realized I didn't belong there. And I don't know if this place, I know it's not crossing it over. It's just here on the planet. Maybe it's a pocket of space that we create, and we can rescue ourselves out of there, because I did get out. And then when I got out, I was safe. But we rescue ourselves, I learned, so the light's always there when we're ready to go to it. I think it's just a lesson to learn. For me, I felt like if I hadn't known that deep fear and that darkness, I wouldn't have understood love and light the way I did when I got out of it. So I think I was shown that for a reason. When I asked God, why does evil exist? That's the perfect answer. It's the absence of love, and then love itself. It's like, how can you know one if you don't know the other? So,
you have to have that contrast to really appreciate the love.
oh yeah. So I learned that if we hadn't had the opportunity to fight for our love and our light, we wouldn't have been able to expand it as vast and as great as we have. Mm-hmm. And so then I saw many visions. I asked questions, and I was able to actually see the birth of creation, which is, I'm putting that in a book right now I'm writing, and it was the birth of light, but I was inside of it. We were all there in one moment of creation. And it felt like an explosion of love, and we are always a part of it, even though it expands and it's like one universe ending and another beginning. I knew we never had to die. We never would. We're eternal. And so like there was nothing to fear anymore. I'm like, oh, we're always there. We're always a part of it. And it's just, I've over the past 7 years of first seeing these visions and then learning all of the things I've learned through books that I've read and other people experiencing the same thing, just different words. It's all the same truths. And so it's just really neat to be a part of it. And the journey itself after seeing all of this has been the most profound, because I've been able to articulate it and share it with people. So
you were at one time pretty actively engaged in social media. Did that happen before, during, or after what tell us a little bit about how you got involved in
that? When I made a prayer during that time, I asked why evil existed, and I said, I want to be used as a vessel to change the world. And so I was shown part of the stuff I was seeing, the darkness was coming from cell phones. So I knew that they weren't originally created for good. They were created from a negative source to use for control. And I knew the smartphones were kind of like the final way for us to be controlled and manipulated. And although we're using it to our advantage, and we've been, actually learning a lot through communication, we wouldn't have been able to do that So we've been using it for good. But the social media aspect I learned about was, and I put it in my first book, I did try to articulate it the best I could, but I was still within the confines of my religious beliefs at that time when I wrote Journey Through Jesus. And I did put a lot in there about social media. And I was trying to explain that it's social media that makes us self-centered. And we don't see that until we step away from it, because our life was not meant to be put on this platform for people to see and view as we're like celebrities. You know, we were meant to share moments with people, sacred moments with people. And that was supposed to be witnessed by God. And putting it out there to public view, it kind of taints it. And for me to understand that, I had to get off social media and using it all the years I used it for my personal life. Getting away from that, I learned and looked back at it, seeing it what it was. And I had my privacy back in my life with my family. And those moments were cherished. Those moments weren't trying to show off to anybody anymore. And it's not something you can actually see. It's the only way I can describe it is if somebody's in an abusive relationship and they can't see that they're in one until they leave the relationship and look back at it, then that's kind of how they can see that it wasn't good for them. So I did learn all that, and then I tried to just use my social media for my writing as an outlet and add YouTube videos that I was creating to share God's messages. And then I learned that spiritual fame is not something that I wanted, and I decided to delete it all. You know, I wanted to give that gift to the world, but I didn't want spiritual fame. You know, I hit a roadblock where I was like, you know, I don't like the way this feels. I don't like being put on a pedestal. I'm just a vessel for God. I'm not above anybody else. We are all part of this. And I saw people chasing spiritual fame. I saw them trying to get a lot of subscribers on their channels, and it's our egos. It's not our fault. We want to feel special. We want to be the one to explain what we saw, and everyone holds a piece to the truth. I know that to be true. And everyone has the best way of articulating it the best they can. But that's the YouTube's still a thing I use. I still use YouTube for learning stuff and hearing people's stories. But as far as me having my own channel, I don't need it anymore. Yeah.
So you said earlier when you went through this kind of fasting period and we were asking questions about why evil existed, eventually you got some answers from God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least some other source. Can you talk a little bit more about, were there specific things you were led to understand, or what was that experience like? What kinds of things came through?
Well, I learned a lot from reading different books, but personally, I saw that we were all on a different journey, of course, through spiritual growth, but we went into these cocoons. Like, God keeps using metaphors when he speaks to me. So like I was seeing butterflies, and we started off so innocent, and then we went through all of our challenges and darkness, and then emerging from that out of our cocoons, we became more beautiful. And so it's not like embracing the dark. We see things as good and bad, black and white, but there's just depth to it, is what I saw. The journey has given our soul depth. So even though we see things as good and evil, it's so, there's a lot more to it than that. And I understood it, and it was hard for me to actually articulate that in my writing. Mm-hmm. But I just, those of us who crossed over or felt that, we know that, oh, this is all for a reason. This is important. We're a part of God's dream, and God created this beautiful dream, and we are the dreamers.
So that kind of aligns with another writer, like Walsh is his name, wrote Conversations with God.
Uh-huh.
What I hear you saying is kind of similar, that it's a human perspective to judge things as being good and evil.
Mhm.
Um, Perhaps the evil from a human perspective is really, from a spiritual perspective, just another way of helping us evolve.
Mhm.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I read some of his work. My friend wanted me to listen to his audiobook, and this was before my experience, and I was really confined with my Christian beliefs, and I wouldn't hear it. It's different language. I'm not going to listen to that. And then I later on read, I think halfway through one of his books, but it's kind of like I said before, we all share the same truth, just in different words. And it's like we're being used as a vessel to share it. If we're allowing ourselves to be messengers.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. I love actually listening to everybody's different way of articulating it all.
Well, there are a fair number of people who are seeking knowledge, I guess. And there are a lot of, probably more people, at least in my experience, that are comfortable staying with what they believe. It can be difficult when you get exposed to new ideas that challenge your existing belief system. Um, but there's so much reward if you work your way through that and open yourself up to maybe new truths.
Yeah, it's like programming for me. I call it programming because it's a fear, fear of not staying within that comfort zone. Oh no. And you're afraid to get outside of that. And that's our own mind. That's just our mind. And we're still stuck in our human brains. So it's hard for us. But when you leave, which a lot of people have had that experiences where there's nothing to fear anymore. Once you're out of your body,
Mm-hmm.
there's no fear. So it's
Yeah,
just human minds.
yeah. It's you if you listen to near-death experiencers, you leave illness, injuries, ego, all that stuff gets left behind when you get to the other side. And if we could only find ways of letting go of some of that stuff while we're in this physical body, then I think we can find um, greater joy in life. There's some research that showed students who studied near-death experiences in college uh, had positive. They didn't have near experiences themselves. They just studied the subject. Um, and when they surveyed them after going through the training, the course, they found that there were positive shifts in their attitudes and values. So the sharing of stories with one another um, seems like an important thing to do, because we can lift our vibration level collectively by doing that. Sounds like you're in agreement with that concept.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've mentioned this to some people before. This last IANS conference I went to, um, I reprised a role as the ask me person. So if you had questions, I've been to enough of these things, you know, I wore a bright yellow construction vest, and it had a sign in the back that said, ask me. Um, the first full day of the conference, in that morning, um, I would repetitively walk up and down the main lobby area, just so that people could ask me questions or I could help people. I noticed that there was a somewhat young woman with a male friend off to the side, and she was kind of quietly crying. And I thought, well, I don't know what this is. I should go over and see if I can be of help. And her reaction was one of, there's nothing wrong. I'm just so emotionally taken by the love that I feel here. She had never been to an IANS conference before, and to be surrounded by all these people who had had these experiences that, it's like Ron, when you've been to the other side and you start living that, you try to be an instrument of love. When you have a lot of people together doing that, it creates an environment that lifts you up. And in her case, she hadn't been in an environment like that before. It was so emotionally charged that she had to find a way of um, expressing her joy through tears. I remember telling her, well, okay, so you don't have any problems. You're enjoying. You're getting something out of this, and you've got a friend here that you can lean on him. So I run into her from time to time over the course of that long weekend, and just ask her how she was doing, and it was fascinating to watch this kind of blossoming comfort and just becoming part of that whole community over the course of that weekend. So I wish there was some way we could bottle that and bring it out.
Yeah.
We keep trying, if we share our stories and understand that love is behind it all. Um, I've told somebody, I don't feel, well, I expect to live a long life. If something were to happen, I'm not worried about it. So if you let go of that fear of death, um, now it's a little different at different ages. You're young enough. You have, I don't know how old your kids are, but when you have
I'll be 42 in a month, but my oldest son, I had him at 20, and so he's 22.
okay,
And then my daughter is going to be 8 this next week.
yeah. So when
So
you have
far apart.
when you have others who are dependent upon you, you have a little different perspective. But yeah, it's is that one that we met to the IANS conference in or in Salt Lake City? Is that the
DC. No, I actually came by myself. I wanted to face my fears. My worst fear has always been public speaking. So I had done Toastmasters probably for like a month, no, 2 months before I went. And I had to face my fears. And that's why I did it mainly. I didn't go there to sell a book, or I didn't even bring my books. I just wanted the experience alone.
So was it as hair raising as you thought it might be, or did you get through it okay?
I mean, I've always had
I think you've frozen.
anxiety, and I don't take medication for. I ventilated in the bathroom before I went on. And I thought the audience was going to be this huge audience. It was just a small little audience. But it was just I kept having this dream or these visions. I get a lot of visions. And the vision that I had before I went on the trip was the shark, this great white shark. And I was looking right at it in his eyes. And it was a metaphor to face my fears. So after coming back, I stopped having that dream, that vision pop up. So, I mean, everyone goes for different reasons. I wanted to share my message, but I actually told them to take it down offline. I didn't want it being on there. I just felt like whoever was meant to be there to hear it was there to hear it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it sounds like you'd already kind of let go. You've been through the social media um, building an image, and you'd come to the conclusion that's not what you wanted.
it's not why
So
we're here. Yeah, it's not why we're here.
I could see why you might look at your presentation at IANS, and that's it's not about me making building myself up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in your case, you were trying to confront your own fears about um, yeah, confronting fears. I guess that's something that I find it's hard to do, but you get so much value out of it when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think back on the challenging times in my life. When I was in the midst of those times, they were tough to go through. But in retrospect, I can see how important they were in shaping who I am now. And I encourage people to look at their lives from that lens. Like you said earlier, in some ways it's all good. Even the challenging things that we go through, health problems, loss of people, maybe there's a purpose for that that we won't know until we actually get to the other side. But if
Well,
we,
one thing God said that made a lot of sense to me was, without loss, love would be forgotten.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, oh, that's true. It's the longing we feel for those we've lost. And then when we have these reunions in eternal realms, our reunions are that much greater and stronger, and makes our love that much more, vibrant.
Yeah.
And that's neat. So,
Well, let's open this up to some questions. People have been listening. Would you like to pose a question to Stacy?
I'll start. Stacy, how has your beliefs changed over all the years? Have you sensed a progression or some continuum that you've moved along as you've had all these experiences and written all these books and got involved with social media in and out? Could you comment about how you see that walk over all those years, how that's looked to you?
well, I definitely have expanded my understanding of why we're here. And I had a lot of visions of past lives. I had memories of past lives and on earth. And when I wrote my first book, I couldn't put them in there because I was afraid I'd get ridiculed I was afraid of getting judged. And I had been I didn't grow up as a Christian with a Christian background, but I did start studying it later in life. And that's where where I thought the answers were. So I couldn't put these experiences in my first book. And I was still involved in a church at that time. And then I stopped going because I couldn't really fit in there anymore. They kept following the same patterns. And so I had to go off on my own. And I read the Michael Newton books, which were actually really neat to see from that perspective. And I've read countless NDE stories, but I mean, the depth of it was going through it all and just getting through the fear, because what are we afraid of? We're given the ability to learn and grow, and we don't need to be afraid of that, and to explore things and explore why we're here. And there was things that I got turned off by on social media where people were, I love humility and I also love confidence, but I know that there's this desire for fame in the world, which I've seen people, it's based on intention. So if I got turned off by something, it was because somebody was intentionally doing it for the reason to to have this fame. And I was like, oh, I don't want that either. I got really turned off by a lot of the spiritual community aiming for that and trying to climb this ladder of success. And I'm like, well, how did that happen? How did we get all the way over here? Where's the balance in all of that? So that's where I'm at now. I kind of want to just find people who know that they're here for a reason, and they're doing their part, and they're not afraid to share their story, but they're not doing it for any other reason but just to be a part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So just as a follow-up, do you see the way you feel about things and your desire to be humble or have humility as a spiritual test in and of itself?
It's for me, the ego part, where a lot of people think ego is arrogance. For me, the ego is that I wasn't good enough, that I've never been good enough. And so I think it depends on where you are in your spiritual journey, and especially reflecting on my past lives where I carried a lot of that shame with me from suffering. One in particular where I had memories of the Holocaust, and I died at 12. I brought that with me, shreds of that with me into this life of feeling like I was dehumanized, like I was shred to nothing. And I had a memory of looking down at a pair of socks. They had white ruffles on them.
Mm.
And that is all that I had left in the cell before I walked out to die. Were these beautiful little white ruffled socks. They were dirty, but they were still a little bit of ruffles on them. And I looked down and I said, well, they didn't take that. They couldn't take that from me. And I looked straight into the guy who was going to take my life. And I was already in heaven at that point. And I looked him straight in the eye and I said, you didn't break me. And that was the last memory I have of my last life coming into this life. I didn't have a very good childhood, but it's almost like you have to start somewhere. You have to realize that you chose your life. You chose the parents you have. You chose the experiences that you have to help shape you, but you have to understand that the suffering makes our soul more beautiful because it gives us empathy. And with empathy, we can share on people's suffering with compassion and transform it. And so it's like carrying each other out of the darkness together. So we can actually heal this world that we're in that's so full of the immense suffering. So I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of got off track there, just because it's such a profound experience to know that the ego, even though people can have one way or the other, it's a feeling of something missing. We want to be loved, and we don't know how to get that. So we look for ways to fill that void within us. And for a lot of people, they feel like if they feel special and they're in the limelight and they get all of this, these adoring fans, that's going to fill that void, but it doesn't fill it. Mm. And I knew that instantly when I felt that it was off. I said, this is not what I want. I don't want this kind of attention. This isn't what love is. And I immediately deleted it all because I just wanted to share my messages. And I hadn't even gotten to the point where I had a lot of subscribers, but I didn't want it. I was like, this is not authentic. So.
Now, I know you've done a lot of messaging work for people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, for last year, I did sessions with people where I would do my automatic writing, and they would fill out a questionnaire, and then I would write down kind of what soul color they were, and they wanted to work through where were they blocked, what could they be working through, and I'd write it all down, and then I'd have a Zoom call with them, and I'd go through it with them. And I did have some breakthroughs with some people who said I was really helping. And then I just felt like it was a little too much responsibility for my life with my daughter, because it is a big responsibility. And I feel like that is more for people who don't have kids, maybe. So I made a choice to let it go, so I could give time to my daughter.
Sounds like you, looking at this trajectory, you had a period of time in your life where you had to go through these experiences to learn more about yourself. And now that you've gotten that knowledge, you're turning back toward a little more traditional life for now, caring for your daughter. Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting to someday look, all right, once your daughter's out on her own, will that open the opportunity for you to re-embark on explorations?
Well, I'm writing a book right now that I didn't think I was going to write. And I kept putting it down for 7 years. I kept putting it down, and they kept saying, your book's already been written. Like my spirit guides or God I talked to. And I kept thinking, why are they saying that? Okay, I don't need to write anything because it's already been written. And I had written so many poems, and then I haven't thought about writing a book. I wrote one about social media, which I knew was important. But this one was just, it just came together, but they kept telling me, I kept being told, don't write this for anybody but yourself. Mm-hmm. Please just write this for yourself. And when doing so, I felt this immense peace while I was writing, and I just felt like I was safe, and the words just kind of flowed out of me in an eloquent way. And whenever I felt like discernment, it was like my chest would get heavy, and the discernment would come inside of me, and it's like, it's your time, it's done now. You have to put it down. So it's kind of been like a book of patience, just learning to just write it with patience, because I always get ahead of myself, and just letting God guide me, because it's like, this is the time you do this, and this is the time you stop, and this is not a race. So it's almost done, and it's just I'm gonna put it out when it's ready to get put out on its own time. So.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure others get a chance to pose questions. If you,
I'll ask one more. Stacy, how has your walk changed the way you raise your kids? How do you raise your kids differently now as opposed to 10 years ago or 5 years ago?
Well, I had my son when I was 20,
Right.
and I was just a young mom. He says I did a good job. He doesn't blame me, which is good. Kids usually blame their parents for how they turn out, but he said thank you for being tough on him. I was really tough on him with school, and when I thought school mattered so much,
Right.
like it was like it's all about the grades, all about what college you go to. With my daughter, I'm more lenient because I'm like, well, that's not really the whole thing, but it's like way different, because it's different periods of my life. But I think that my kids are actually my teachers. So I'm not teaching them, they're teaching me. Like my son, he taught me humility. He has this beautiful blue soul that came in. And from my understanding, I see souls as colors. And from my understanding, I had growth to do. So his blue soul helped transform my soul. And then my daughter, she was born with this beautiful confidence that I have never been able to have. And I know I'm in this life to try to get confidence back. And she has this beautiful fuchsia color soul that she just shines. And I'm always admiring that in her. And in a way, they taught me. So I see it differently. I just see it that we all express our own colors, and we all kind of share it with each other and blend our colors together.
That's cool. Well,
do
thank
you
you.
find that certain colors have a specific meaning to them? So if you see someone who has a fuchsia aura and another person has a fuchsia aura, that those auras there's a commonality of some sort?
When I think about it, it's almost like I think of planets. Like the planets have their own expression and heartbeat of color. And I know there's so many planets in the universe. So when I think of certain people, and how to capture their essence and their color, it's almost like they came from this beautiful, confident planet, and they share that energy together. And then maybe one of them comes to Earth and wants to expand that, and Earth's hard to come to. That's like, as we know. And it's like we pick up the colors here from Earth, but then we're all coming from different places in the universe. So we've kind of turned into a melting pot on Earth, because we have such a vast range. I've been told that this is our last planet that we're actually going through these lessons on, and this is our last planet of learning. So all these souls coming in, different expressions, these beautiful, I can't even explain all the colors I saw, because there's more. And so it's neat, because we have a big, vast range of people here, and it's a lot of diversity, which might be why there's a lot of strange, things going on in our world we can't understand necessarily. Maybe they don't feel like they fit in here, a lot of souls, because they're not used to how Earth is.
So you're expressing a concept that I'll highlight, and that is, while we're humans in this existence, that doesn't mean that this is the only place that we get experience. Our souls are much more diverse than just saying we're human souls, right?
Mhm. Well, I did see the like the planet Earth. It's like the last, and it's like the young. I think it's like there's a lot of older planets, and I think Earth is probably the, I don't know, I can't say, but I remember just I have only been here since kind of when it started, and they say I haven't really gone anywhere. Like I keep coming back here
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over and over again, and so I have a lot of these lifetimes, almost like I'm connected to a lot of people here. Like the empathy that I have for people is so immense. I don't even know how to explain it. I ask people like my aunt, who I know who's from somewhere else. Her expression is just so beautiful, and she came here to help. But I ask her, "Do you feel the pain in the world?" And she says, "Oh, I don't feel that." And I think it's just because of the empathy that I've developed from all the suffering. And I have so many lifetimes where I actually just did one with a woman who helped me kind of go back to a couple of lifetimes to kind of heal myself. Because as we know, time doesn't exist. So there's so many fractals of ourselves imprinted onto the planet. And it's like going back to that time and space. And even though our soul crossed over after that life, our fractal's still there. So it's like rescuing ourselves from these pieces of ourselves on the planet that
Mm-hmm.
need to be healed. And so I've gone through that the past. There's a shift. There's a final shift we just had that we're going through right now that I'm very aware of. And the veil's getting very thin right now, and it's helping me face even darker fears that I never wanted to face before. And it's like you have to feel the pain to get through it. You have to face the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't go into details about what I've been through, but it's like all of Mother Earth's deep dark shadows are coming out, and she's trying to heal herself. And the only way I can explain that is the pain that I feel is her. It's Mother Earth herself. Like she's not just pained by the the way we treat the earth, she's pained by how we treat each other. So even though people are all about healing the earth on the outside, it's more about how we treat each other, and she soaks it all in. And so it's like a release of this pain. And recently I just in meditation I went down into the core of her, and I felt her pain, and I just tried to meditate there, and I was like, I could feel it. Like I can feel it there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't explain that to people who maybe haven't been to Earth as many times. Like I've been stuck here. I feel like people rescued me. A lot of people like you and people I've met who have had these beautiful experiences, and they're sharing their journey with me. Like I've been stuck on Earth for a long time, and they came here to rescue me out of the darkness. So, and probably many more of us that have been stuck here and we couldn't leave.
I'm sure there are people who would say that you have rescued them. We're collectively in this. Um, it's not like there's a group of people who are the rescuers and the group of people who are the rescuees. We're all working through this together.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So, Stacy, do you see the things you just talked about as maybe a way for Gaia or Mother Earth to raise her vibration? Is to see or you experience all the things that she's experiencing, but you bring it up and you cry about it and you let it go. And do you see that as a way to raise your vibration, or do you see that as Gaia raising her vibration by bringing up all these pains and sorrows, experiencing them again, and then letting them go as a way to get rid of them?
I think it's simultaneous. I think that if we don't want to face our darkest insecurities and our fears, then we're not able to go with this rise that's happening, because it's part of the process. It's painful. And it depends on where we are in our journey. And some of us aren't embedded into this karmatic web we've made for ourselves on the earth, but it is a web we've actually made. A lot of us have made. And it's almost like you have to take accountability and know that there's no one to blame. You know, you don't have to blame anybody. But I saw that forgiveness is our key, that in forgiving people and forgiving is the key to actually our final shift is embracing the forgiveness and compassion, and that sets us free finally.
Do you see, you mentioned sex trafficking and some of the other evil in the world. I always look at it as going to a gym, and if you want to improve your strength, you exercise with greater resistance. You put more weights on the machine when you do your exercising. And I've always seen some of the, people who ask the questions, why do bad things happen to people? And I look at it as maybe being in a gym, you're just increasing the resistance to the exercises that you have to do. And I just wondered if you might see some of those things as a spiritual exercise or as a way to strengthen yourself.
I have a very personal, deep connection with the trafficking because I know they had it way worse than I had as a child, but I was sexually molested as a child and my innocence was stolen. And so I felt like I had to share that pain with the people on the planet, but the people that want to hurt children, I don't understand that kind of evil. I can't understand it. And I know that the levels of soul, the way our souls work with free will, we can't evolve past a certain point. We have to keep coming back. And we can only grow from our own levels. And so some people keep coming back and they can stay on that same spectrum of trying to fill that void within them with things that will give them pleasure. And it's almost like the who knows if the souls that are experiencing this pain now could be reversed in roles. Some of them could have chosen to share, to be the victims of in the past of them being the perpetrator as a choice for karma. I mean, I know that's an option for people to pay it back. But for me, I remember I chose this life so I could have that pain, so I could share that pain with the kids in this life. There, a lot of them chose to be here to heal it because it's a deep pain in the world that it's only gotten worse. I mean, it's always been here, but with the internet, it's gotten worse because of the pornography of kids. It's not something we like to talk about, but it's because of the internet that it's gotten worse. And so it's like we're healing it, through our compassion and empathy by seeing what's going on. It's hard to see it. And I have a lot of friends that say, I don't want to watch The Sound of Freedom because I just can't. And I go, I had to watch it. I had to watch it to honor that it was really happening and not, ignore it, because it's a part of the pain of the process of sharing pain with people.
Thanks.
Well, I think it's about time to look at bringing this to a close. Stacy, I really appreciate your participating this evening, even though we missed the first hour with you, or you missed the first hour with us, I guess. But thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your insights. We learn from one another, and that's why we have these gatherings to reflect on other people's stories, because they may have lessons for us.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.